Hey, everybody, it's Pastor Dave again with another episode of Lessons for Life. Do we have a great lesson today? And to start, let me introduce the person that's going to give you the lesson. Come on down, Bob Brewer.
How you doing, Dave? I want to thank you for having me on today.
I'm thrilled to have you on. As I've been talking to you about your story, I've learned a lot. And my brother Don Mathis is the one that recommended you. Did you know that?
Yes, a good friend of mine.
Let's start like we always start. And then, in fact, let's start a little different. I'm going to just sort of give an outline of the story we're going to see. And then I'm going to ask you your favorite Bible verse. Bob and his wife have quite a story to tell you. His wife, his name is Debbie. They had a experience with a pregnancy where things didn't go right. And the doctors told them their only choice basically was an abortion. Do you see the story down there called Amy's Miracle? It's a lot deeper than that. Am I right, Bob?
Absolutely.
So let's start with your favorite Bible verse and why you like it.
My favorite Bible verse is Philippians 4:13. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me.
And why do you like that one?
I've used it pretty much up through, high school, college, and business. I just think it really it helps to get your mind right, understanding that God's in control.
It's a great reason for it, and that's a verse I use a lot in my life. Now, let's get into the story. You've been married how many years?
48, be 49 in July.
And this took place how many years ago?
Well, actually, it took place about 34 years ago.
So we're talking it out from history, but I know from talking to you, you still get emotional about it. Why don't we just dig right into it? Let's talk about your wife's pregnancy, Debbie's pregnancy, and how it progressed. And if you don't mind, I'll ask questions as you go through it. Okay?
Sounds good. Well, I get the best place to start was back in 1990. My wife Debbie was pregnant, and she's about 3.5 months pregnant, and we were living in Milwaukee, Wisconsin at the time, and we were getting ready to move to Indianapolis. And she had taken a test with her OBGYN in Milwaukee, and the doctors came back and said there's some irregularities or some things we're concerned about. So the first thing you need to do when you get to Indianapolis is find another OBGYN and let them do some tests and kind of see where it goes from there. So we got to Indianapolis.
Before you go on, did the original guy say anything about what the problems were?
No.
So you're just going blind.
Just that there were concerns.
Okay, go ahead.
And so we ended up getting to Indianapolis. We found a good OBGYN. He did some tests and he came back and said, well, we did see some problems too. We'd like you to go see these neonatal specialists in St. Francis Hospital in Indianapolis and allow them to do some scans and some other, higher tech, just exams that they can take a look at. And they came back and asked us to come to the hospital and meet with them. And so we did. And when we came back to the hospital, and at this point now Debbie is somewhere about a little over 5 months pregnant. And they said after the test we took and the scans, we determined that the baby you're carrying has something called Potter syndrome, and it's where the kidneys aren't going to maybe form properly, and she'll have trouble breathing. So if you go full term and deliver this baby, the baby will either be born, stillbirth or be dead. They will not be able to live outside the womb. So we ended up, just kind of, we were in shock. We knew there might be complications. We didn't expect that. And then they said, well, we have something we can do for you. However, is in the state of Indiana, you're past the time to have an abortion. However, we can write letters on your behalf and send it to the state. And we feel pretty confident that they will allow you to have an abortion if that's what you want to do. and that's what we suggest. And we, Deb and I just looked at each other and they said, we'll give you a couple of days to think about it. And we said, well, we don't need a couple of days. That we definitely know we're not going to do an abortion. And they basically looked at us and said, are you sure? I mean, you want to do that? And we said, well, yeah. And they said, well, we don't agree with that. And they turned around and they walked out the door, pretty hastily. And they said, well, get back with your OBGYN and you guys can, take it from here. And that's what we ended up doing, which took us up to the birth.
Okay, now these doctors you saw told you there was basically no chance the baby would live. And they gave you the solution of an abortion, and you didn't wait. You told me you didn't wait at all. You made the decision just by looking at each other.
We knew it. We know our faith already. We knew our beliefs were very strong that we were not going to do an abortion. We're very pro-life. But the main thing was that Debbie, she felt the baby moving inside of her, and there's no way that at that point we could go forward with an abortion, even if we wanted to, which of course we didn't. And so we did go full term. Or actually, she went to 8 months before she actually started having contractions.
So she had the baby, and the baby is Amy, right? You gave her a name. So how long does baby live, or is it still alive?
Well, if I could just back up a second, I'd say it's something that happened as when she had contractions. We were leaving our neighborhood in Carmel, Indiana, and getting on the highway, and there was a stoplight there, and it was red. And just as it turned green, we pulled out, and this white light just shot right through the car in the front seat, and just took us both aback. We could feel the vibration, and we looked left and right. There was nothing there. And so we just continued to the hospital, and we were both just almost in shock, saying, what was that? What just happened? But we did feel like it was a message from God. We weren't sure exactly, other than maybe, he just let us know he was with us. But we ended up going to the hospital, and we got to the hospital, and she was 8 months pregnant. The doctor that was on call was in the group that she had, gone with in the past. And the doctor she liked actually showed up to the hospital to do what was considered a C-section, because the other doctor was going to go ahead and try to induce her. And the doctor that came in said, no, we're going to do a C-section, because she had 2 previous C-sections, because we had 2 prior, our children, we had a 7-year-old and a 9-year-old at the time. And so they thought that was the safest way to go. So he came in and performed the C-section. And as you know, when you do a C-section, they put the curtain between me and I could just see Debbie's head there. And I could tell it was very frantic, and they were scurrying around. You could hear concern. And as the doctor was basically pulling the baby out, he had obviously had some issues, and there was it was an emergency situation. So when Amy was born, he brought her and showed us and said, it's a baby girl. But then again, they didn't expect her to live. And when they took her over to clean up the baby, they just kind of showed us real quick. And then the doctor asked me, said, could you come out in the hallway with me? I'd like to talk to you. I said, well, sure. And as we did, he was very upset and said, look, I'm so sorry, but it was an emergency situation. And when I was in there, I had to cut some tubes or cords or whatever it was. He said, but I had to do some things that to make sure that Debbie was okay. He said, but because of that, Debbie would never be able to have kids again. She can't get pregnant because of what I had to do in that emergency situation. So I didn't know what to say. We just the baby's born. He's telling me this, and they started getting Debbie ready and sewing her up and stuff and getting her ready to go up to her room, which we did go up to her room. And they brought the baby there, and that was the first time we had a chance to hold her. And Debbie had a chance to hold her, and we had some family and friends in, and they were able to hold her. And my kids were able to hold her. And then she was actually had her eyes open, and she was smiling. And it was amazing, because the doctors and the nurses couldn't believe it. They said, she shouldn't be alive. We didn't think she'd live a minute, much less than, now. And she ended up living for 8 hours. And during that time, we had a chance to love on her, and she was able to give us her love. And unfortunately, she passed in Debbie's arms. and she lived for 8 hours. And we went ahead and had the ceremony. We had a burial at a children's cemetery there in Indianapolis area. And
I got to ask this. I just got to ask this question. You did a lot of prayer. You had a lot of faith. You made a decision that you put in God's hands. And yet, God seemed to let you down, Jim. Did you ever feel that way, that when the baby passed away, that God had left you? You'd prayed for this and it was totally different than the answer you thought you'd get?
No, we never blamed God. We never ever had that thought. I think, for Debbie and I can speak for both of us that, we trusted in God and we put it in His hands. And so that was what happened is when, we felt it was kind of a miracle that she lived 8 hours and we had a chance to love her and see her. And so, no, I never did feel anything but love for God and just thankful for, the blessing of having the opportunity to be with her that long.
Now, this is where I love the story, because sometimes God doesn't answer when we want Him to. He answers when He wants to let us know, right?
Absolutely. And
so this story is not over yet. We're only halfway through it. Bob, take it from there and tell us what happened next.
Well, so we ended up, going home after she was recovering from the hospital, and she was we had an upstairs a bedroom, so she really couldn't go down the steps, being having surgery as a C-section. So, with the two kids getting off to school and stuff, I took that responsibility. We moved, made sure that the kids got out the door like they were supposed to and doing all their activities. And then, of course, I'd be home with Debbie. And we'd end up just laying there. We'd watch the 700 Club. We'd listen to Christian music. We'd read the Bible. And we just made sure faith was, the forefront. And we just, prayed to God for Debbie to recover. And also that we just thanked Him for the fact that, that He did allow us to have, meet Amy. But so after about 6 months, Debbie came to me, and she's now feeling better. And she's, before that she did too, but now she said, Bob, I just threw up. I had morning sickness. That's the same feeling I have when I'm pregnant. And the OBGYN had told us, the doctor, if you ever get pregnant, it'll be a tubal pregnancy, which is very dangerous. And that's the only way you get pregnant, because there's no way you can carry a baby. So we called the doctor next morning. He said, come in immediately. We come in, and the first thing he says, let me take my own test. He takes his test. He comes back, and he was kind of sheepish. He was almost white colored. And he said, I don't know how to tell you this, but you're pregnant. He said, and it looks like it's a normal pregnancy. He said, I can't believe it. He said, this should never happen. And so that's when we found that out.
Okay, let me see if I got this straight. This is the same doctor that made an error in surgery, but yet was honest with you. And now he realizes that God is in control. Was he a Christian to start with?
Oh, no. He said he wasn't a person of faith, and he had told us during our journey how much he admired our faith. He said, you guys, your faith is so strong. One thing I didn't bring up too, when we were at St. Francis Hospital, there was a nun that knew our story, and that our story kind of was resonating throughout the hospital and in the area. And she said, I'd like to include your story in my book I'm going to write. And she said, because the story you have of faith is something that, I want to make sure that I let other people hear about. So that was something that when Debbie was in the hospital, the nun came in and mentioned that to her. And so we, like I said, it was something that when Debbie did find out she was pregnant, the doctor had already been told by the nun and other people there that, hey, this is kind of amazing that first of all, they went through with it, but secondly, that the baby even lived, 1 minute.
Is the doctor a Christian now, or you don't know?
Well, yeah, it was amazing. So what happened, I'll kind of fast forward. So when Debbie went full term, and she was having another C-section, and our baby was born. Of course, there was some reluctance. We were, we were concerned, but they had told us things looked great. So when she was born, I mean, she was over a 9-pound baby. Her name was Allison. And our baby that passed Amy was Amy Elizabeth. And so we named Allison Elizabeth. And she was healthy as could be, and perfect baby little girl. And the doctor couldn't believe it. The nurses couldn't believe it because he said it was an impossibility for her to have a baby. And he started crying and he was weeping and said, I've seen a miracle. He said, this is a miracle. He said, this changed my life. And he said, because your faith, it's obvious that your faith is being rewarded by God. He goes, and I've talked to other people about it, the nursing staff there, his staff in his office, people around the hospital. And he was the one kind of spreading the story that, he saw a miracle. And because he was obviously the one that delivered the baby.
Can you see, folks, when we start talking about how sometimes we get down in the dump, we get at the bottom of the mountain, we think God is gone out of our life. But I'm telling you, just like Bob would tell you, he's never gone. He's there. And God answers prayer. And here's an example of how he answered prayer. Now, let's talk a little bit about Allison. That picture was an old picture. And I don't know if they'll put it back up again, but you might want to tell which one is Allison.
Well, she's the one in the red sweater, and she is now 31. And you talk about, I guess, another thing that happened here that was kind of a blessing was she is now a NICU nurse.
That's amazing. So she's healthy, right?
Right.
She went to high school like everybody else does, went to nursing school, and you've never noticed any problems. Is that correct?
Nothing at all, from the delivery.
It looks to me like she's a very attractive young lady and that she's a gift from God. Would you agree with that?
Oh, all three of our kids are gifts from God, but hers was a little different story because, she wasn't supposed to be here.
I agree with that now. Let's bring it home. Let's start talking about, this is a program as Lessons for Life. You might talk about any lessons you've learned. And then again, you might talk about other people that are going through things in their life that they've lost a little faith and they need to have more faith. You want to take this opportunity to tell people a little about maybe some of the lessons you and your wife have learned, and then some of the lessons maybe they can learn.
Sure, Dave. I think the main thing is never lose your faith. I mean, everything's in God's time, and it's important, I think, for us as Christians to trust God. Trust Him with your heart, soul, your mind. Pray, and He does hear us. I mean, He understands. As a matter of fact, there was something that I actually put together that I was going to just read here that I thought was a kind of symptomatic of what happened. And I'll just read it real quick. It just said, grace moves toward us in our moments of despair. God knows we are hurting, and He comes closer to us, and His grace allows us to get through the trauma. And many times we don't understand that days, weeks, or months down the road, we ask ourselves, how did we get through that tragedy? And we realize it was always God's love. We found out that our faith was stronger than our fear. And God showed us His love as a gift of a perfect baby girl. So when you live for the Lord, God notices.
What great advice, and what a great lesson to be able to learn. Now, how do you spread the word today? Have you told this story to anybody before?
I've told friends, and our family knows about it. So I've never really, this is the first time I've done it publicly, more than just telling one person at a time about it.
Well, you're talking to a lot more people here. Probably 15 to 20,000 people are tuning in and listening to what you say. Now, I have another interesting story you might want to tell us. As I was talking to you, I understand that even all this time later, you have business cards that you pass out, and you still are interested in seeing people turn to Christ. Would you explain that?
I'd be glad to. I think one thing is that, to start it off, I think the fear factor is something that we get so tied up with our relationship with Christ, where we worry, we're afraid of everything, and I think that we have to make sure it's easy for people to understand how Christ is just waiting for us. He's knocking on the door, and so on my business card at the bottom I put believe, receive, become, and I've done that for probably 25, 30 years now. And when someone looks at it, and I've had numerous times people say, what does that mean? And it gives me the opportunity to say, well, if you have a few minutes, I'd love to talk to you about it. And I just explained very simply. I said, you can accept Jesus. It's not hard, and don't be afraid. But, first of all, you have to believe that God is your Lord and Savior. Secondly, you have to receive him into your heart and receive the Holy Spirit. But the third part, I think a lot of people maybe take time to do, and that is change. So believe, receive, become. You have to become a different person. You have to live for Christ. You have to put him first in your life. And I think that's when God really starts touching you in your life, and you see his presence much more when you do that.
That's also something great. Now, let's talk about people that, I don't know, I think you told me this at one time or something, that there is a lot of people that claim they believe in God and believe in Christ. The figure you gave me earlier was like 72%.
Right.
I know, I thought it was closer to 90, but let's suppose that is true. 72% say they believe in God. But I've had the experience in my life before, asking these same people, and they tell you they believe in God. I'll say to them, if you died tonight, would you go to heaven? And most of them will say they hope so, or they're not sure. Do you have that same response?
I guess my response is, when we talk about fear again, I think that's something that, I fear God. I don't fear death. And I think that when you're a Christian, and when you in God's first in your life, you're living for him. And none of us are perfect. I'm a sinner just like everybody else is, but you try to get closer to God every day, and you want people to see Christ through you. And hopefully that light from Christ is something that people see and they want to have it. And so, I think it's important for people to be bold in their faith and not be afraid to tell people, hey, yeah, I follow Christ. Because what happens is a lot of times people say, well, it's not the most popular thing in the world to be right now as a Christian, but 73% or 72% of the people that say they are in America, when I'm out there and walking around different cities and seeing things going on in the world, I'm not sure I see that big a percentage, because, as you know, they've taken a lot of things out of our schools as far as prayer and Bibles. You can't, wear a shirt in some schools in the country with a cross on it. So it's hard to believe that we've allowed that to happen. And that's why I say we have to be bold in our faith and stand up for Christ, and not be afraid that people know that that's where you stand.
Hey, Bob, and many people, I think I've mentioned this before, claim that they want to go to heaven and they believe in God. But then when I talk to them about God and say to them, basically, if you died tonight, would you go to heaven? They just don't know. I think I'm going to turn it to you. You've had so many struggles with your faith, and you've had plenty of time to doubt him. Can you tell people how they could be sure they're going to heaven? Take it away, Bob.
Well, I think to be sure, number one, you have to choose faith over fear. And I think that's one of the things that we have to understand, that throughout the Bible, over 300 times it talks about fear not. So we need to make sure that we let God win, and we listen to him, and we obey what he tells us to do. So a song that I really like from Zach Williams even mentions the fact that, fear is a liar. And basically what it is saying that the devil's a liar. They're always going to make you feel like you're inadequate, or you can't do it, or it's too hard. One of the lines basically says, you're not strong enough to put up a good fight in a song. And that's what the devil wants you to think. So don't allow yourself to be afraid. To get rid of the fear, lean toward your faith, and understand that God's listening. Accept God into your heart, and make sure that once you do that, you will feel his presence. And at that point, continue praying, make him first in your life. And I think at that point, you'll realize that heaven's waiting on you and you're going to get a chance to see the face of Jesus.
I'm thinking the whole key is John 3:16. People try and make it real difficult.
Exactly.
For God so loved the world that he gave his only son, to die for us. And it goes on to tell us that if we believe that, I'm just going to add my own technology to it, with our heart, soul, and mind, we'll never die. We're going to go to heaven and see Jesus. And the 18th verse says we have a choice. If we don't do that, we're not going to heaven. So, folks, all you have to do really, and we've been telling you that all night long, is trust in him, believe in him. For God so loved the world that he gave his only son, that whosoever should believeth in him should not perish, but have everlasting life. See how easy it is? Now, we're basically done for tonight. I wish we could stay longer, but hey, abundance is going to cut us off in a few minutes. But I do want to tell you this. Bob and I have enjoyed talking to you tonight. We talked about how you can struggle, but folks, if it ever happens to you, do not lose your faith. So right now, we're ready to say goodbye. So Bob, why don't we wave goodbye to our friends and neighbors and say, we hope to see you again. You ready, Bob? 1, 2, 3. Bye, everybody.
Hello.